October 4th, 1982. Evening. A parking lot off East Sahara Avenue in Las Vegas, shared with Tony Roma's Rib Restaurant. Frank Lefty Rosenthal climbed into his 1981 Cadillac Eldorado, copper-colored, freshly waxed, take-out ribs on the seat beside him. He turned the key. The engine caught. And then small flames licked up out of the defroster vent and spread across the inside of the windshield. A bomb planted by the gas tank had been triggered the moment he started the car. Lefty Rosenthal, 53 years old, the most powerful illegal bookmaker in American history, the man who quietly ran 4 Las Vegas casinos for the Chicago outfit, sat in a car that was filling with fire and asked himself one question.
Why is my car on fire?
Why is my car on fire? That line is documented. He really said it. He told it to author Nicholas Pileggi himself. You know what saved him. A steel plate. General Motors had bolted a stabilizing plate under the driver's seat of that particular Eldorado model to fix a handling problem nobody outside the factory ever thought about. Pure accident of engineering. The blast funneled down and out instead of straight up through his spine. 2 men pulled him clear as he rolled on the asphalt to put out his clothes. Seconds later, the gas tank went up like an atom bomb and threw the 4,000-pound Cadillac into the air. He walked away with burns on his legs, his arm, the left side of his face. He was alive. He didn't understand why. Now, you've seen the movie. Martin Scorsese, 1995. Casino. Robert De Niro plays Ace Rothstein. Joe Pesci plays Nicky Santoro. Sharon Stone plays Ginger. The film ends with that bombing and a voiceover about how the old Vegas died. The corporations moved in.
Today it looks like Disneyland.
The dinosaurs went extinct. Roll credits. Beautiful filmmaking. Total fiction at the finish line. Because what actually happened to Frank Lefty Rosenthal after that bomb went off is the story Hollywood couldn't tell you. He didn't ride off into the desert sunset. He didn't fade quietly. He had a secret. For years, he had been a top-echelon informant for the FBI, feeding the Bureau the inner workings of the Chicago outfit under a code name Achilles. And he carried that secret to his grave, dying in his bed at age 79, a free man with his own money in the bank, a quarter-century after the bomb that should have killed him. This is the real ending, the one De Niro never got to film. But before we get to the betrayal, you have to understand the man, because Frank Lefty Rosenthal wasn't born a wise guy. He was born a numbers savant. June 12th, 1929. Chicago, Illinois. Frank Lawrence Rosenthal came into the world the son of a produce man who owned a few racehorses on the side. The family wasn't poor. They weren't connected. They were ordinary West Side Jews who happened to live within walking distance of every illegal bookmaking parlor in the city. By the time Frank was a teenager, he was at Wrigley Field every afternoon, marking down pitch counts, batter tendencies, weather, umpire patterns, filling a small leather notebook with numbers. Other kids played stickball. Frank played statistics. At 19, he was clerking for mob-backed bookmakers on the South Side. He didn't take bets. He set the lines. And his lines were so accurate that handicappers across the Midwest were calling Chicago just to find out what Lefty had posted. A near-photographic memory for sports data, a cold mathematical brain, and the patience of a surgeon. Here's the thing about Lefty. He was never made. He couldn't be. He was Jewish, and La Cosa Nostra didn't initiate Jews. But the Chicago outfit didn't care about ceremony. They cared about earners. And by the late 1950s, Frank Rosenthal was one of the biggest earners in their illegal sportsbook operation. They moved him to the Miami area to run a national wire room. That's where the trouble started. In September of 1961, Lefty's nationwide reputation as an oddsmaker and a fixer dragged him in front of a U.S. Senate subcommittee, the McClellan Committee, investigating organized crime and gambling. He invoked the Fifth Amendment 37 separate times. He wouldn't answer a thing. The nickname Lefty stuck around this era. He was a genuine southpaw, though the romantic version says he earned it that day by keeping his left hand raised while he took the fifth. 2 years later, in 1963, after dodging a North Carolina warrant and turning fugitive in Miami, he was finally captured and pled no contest to bribing a college basketball player to shave points. He paid a $6,000 fine. It was the only criminal conviction of his life. And somewhere in those years, the FBI got their hooks into him. Here is what we know, and it's important to be precise, because this is the spine of the whole story. After Rosenthal died in 2008, Las Vegas Review-Journal columnist Jane Ann Morrison, working 3 former law enforcement sources, confirmed what mobsters had only ever suspected. Frank Rosenthal was an FBI informant, a top echelon source, codename Achilles. Nobody could pin down exactly when it began. The relationship was long and useful, and one source said he was already informing well before the bomb went off. He fed the Bureau information on the outfit while simultaneously running their operations, and for decades, not a soul on the street could prove it. Let that sink in. The man Hollywood turned into a tragic mob hero was the Bureau's secret asset, Achilles. Even the code name was a warning nobody listened to. In 1968, Lefty moved to Las Vegas. The Chicago outfit had a problem. They had hidden ownership stakes in 4 casinos: the Stardust, the Fremont, the Hacienda. The Marina, all under the umbrella of Alan Glick's Argent Corporation, bankrolled with Teamsters pension money. They needed someone to run those properties without appearing to run them. Someone smart enough to manage the legitimate operation while quietly funneling cash off the top to Kansas City, Milwaukee, and Chicago. Lefty was perfect. No convictions for violence. A clean wife in Jerry McGee, a former Vegas showgirl, the most beautiful woman on the Strip, the brain, the discipline. They installed him as entertainment director, then food and beverage director, then de facto casino boss, earning $250,000 a year as a consultant. He never held a gaming license. He didn't need one. He just ran everything. And then there was the skim. Here is how it actually worked, because nobody breaks this down properly. The Stardust count room took in the cash from the cage every night and counted it before it was deposited. Cameras, supervisors. The skim wasn't done by grabbing chips off the tables. It was done before the count. A trusted courier would arrive, take pre-marked bundles of hundreds, 50,000 at a time, and walk them out a side door before the official tally began. The books showed lower revenue. The state taxed lower revenue. The IRS saw lower revenue, and the missing cash drove east in suitcases and station wagons to the bosses in the Midwest. Over the Argent years, federal investigators estimated the families pulled somewhere between $7 and $15 million in untaxed cash out of those casinos. Lefty Rosenthal was the architect. He kept the trains running. He made sure the floor managers didn't ask questions. And he made everybody rich. But Lefty had a weakness. 2 of them, actually. The first was Jerry. Jerry McGee was about 33 when she married him in 1969. Long legs, red hair, a face the Vegas photographers fought over. She'd been a hustler and a Tropicana showgirl. She had a daughter from a previous relationship and a drug habit she hid well at first. Lefty was obsessed with her. He gave her a safety deposit box of cash and jewelry he later valued at over $1 million. The marriage was, in her own later words, a business arrangement that turned into a prison. She loved him. She also hated him. She drank. She used cocaine. And then she made the mistake that unraveled everything. She started sleeping with Tony Spilotro. Tony Spilotro, the second weakness. Lefty's childhood friend from the west side of Chicago, the man the outfit had sent to Vegas in 1971 to be their muscle. Tony stood about 5'5", built like a fire hydrant, quick to violence. The FBI eventually tied him to some 22 murders. He ran a burglary crew called the Hole in the Wall Gang because they literally cut through walls and roofs to bypass alarms. Lefty was the brain. Tony was the brawn. The outfit wanted them as a team. Instead, Tony slept with Lefty's wife. Lefty found out around 1979. The fights at the Rosenthal house became legend on the Vegas police blotter. Jerry threatened to burn the place down. She held a gun on him in the driveway. She'd take their 2 kids, Stephen and Stephanie, to a hotel and vanish into a bender for days. In 1980, Lefty filed for divorce. It was finalized in January of 1981. Jerry took her share of the cash, fled to Los Angeles, and on November 6, 1982, about a month after Lefty's car bombing, she was found unconscious from an overdose at the Beverly Sunset Hotel on Sunset Boulevard. She died 3 days later, November 9th, cocaine, Valium, and whiskey. She was 46 years old. But by then, Lefty had bigger problems. Because while his personal life was collapsing, his professional life was being dismantled by Nevada gaming regulators. In 1976, the state moved to deny him a key employee license. They didn't just deny it. They humiliated him, citing his bribery conviction, his refusal to answer the Senate, his outfit ties. He sued. He appealed all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court in 1977. The court ruled against him. He had no constitutional right to a Vegas gaming license. He was finished as an executive. And in 1988, they put him in the Black Book, the list of persons permanently barred from any Nevada casino. This is where Lefty made the decision that sealed his fate with the outfit. He fought back publicly. He went on television. He hosted his own talk show, The Frank Rosenthal Show, taped right inside the Stardust. He used it to attack the Gaming Commission. He brought on Frank Sinatra. He brought on O.J. Simpson. He turned himself into a celebrity. The outfit bosses in Chicago watched this with growing fury. The whole point of Lefty was that he was supposed to be invisible. Instead, he was on TV every week, drawing federal heat onto their entire Vegas operation. By 1982, the bosses had decided Lefty was a liability. And on October 4th, somebody answered that decision with C4. To this day, no one has ever been charged with planting that bomb, and the case was never solved. The popular suspect is Tony Spilotro, the man who had slept with Lefty's wife. But there's a problem with that theory. Spilotro's hits were almost always gunshots. Car bombs were a Kansas City and Milwaukee specialty, and Milwaukee boss Frank Balistrieri was a known bomber with a stake in those casinos. Whoever lit the fuse, it came from the Midwest, and it came because Lefty had become a danger to the skim. And here is where the real story diverges from the movie Forever. Scorsese ends Casino with the bombing as metaphor. The old Vegas dying, the corporations taking over. Roll the credits. But the real Frank Lefty Rosenthal didn't fade into legend. He had a relationship with the federal government that the cameras never saw. He'd been an FBI source for years. After the bomb, the Bureau pushed him hard to come all the way in, to enter witness protection, to testify in open court against the man who'd just tried to kill him. And Lefty said no, flatly.
It's just not my style.
He told the Chicago Tribune,
It doesn't fit into my principles.
"It doesn't fit into my principles." He would inform in the shadows for decades. He would never sit in a witness chair. In September 1983, a federal grand jury indicted 15 Midwest Mafia figures in what became the Strawman case. Joseph Ayupa, the boss of the Chicago outfit. Jackie Cerrone, the underboss. Kansas City's Carl DeLuna. Nick Civella's brother, Carl. Milwaukee boss Frank Balistrieri. The convictions came down in 1986. Ayupa got 28 years. Cerrone got 28 years. The outfit's leadership was gutted, and the Stardust skim was over. But the men who carried that case into the courtroom were the casino frontman Alan Glick, granted immunity, the Cleveland underboss Angelo Leonardo, who flipped, and Teamsters president Roy Williams. Not Lefty. He never took the stand. And here is the question that haunted investigators for 25 years. The architect of the entire skim, the smartest guy in the room, was never even indicted. Why? The answer, revealed only after he died, was Achilles. Tony Spilotro never made it to that trial as a free man. His case had been severed from the others. On June 14th, 1986, Tony and his younger brother Michael, 41, drove to a house in Bensonville, Illinois, believing Tony was about to be promoted. Instead, they walked into a basement full of outfit soldiers and were beaten to death. Their bodies were driven to a cornfield near Enos in Newton County, Indiana, and buried in a shallow grave in their underwear. A farmer found them days later. Tony Spilotro was 48. The outfit had decided he was the problem all along. Too much heat, the wrong woman, Vegas slipping out of control, and he had to go. Now picture this. Frank Lefty Rosenthal, the man Tony Spilotro had likely helped try to murder, the man whose wife Tony had slept with, the man whose decades of quiet cooperation had been feeding the same federal war that gutted the bosses. Lefty was sitting in California when word came that Tony Spilotro was in an Indiana cornfield. By every account from people who knew him, Lefty did not mourn. He poured a drink. He picked up his racing form. He went back to handicapping the next day's card. And then he left, on his own terms. There was no witness program. He'd refused it. There was no new name in Texas, no federal handlers, no government stipend. He simply took the money he had stashed during the good years, the cash hidden in offshore accounts and safety deposit boxes, and he moved first to Orange County, California, and then to Florida. The outfit, gutted by strawmen, no longer had the muscle to come after him. The bosses who'd have wanted him dead were in prison or in the ground. Lefty had outlived his enemies. By the early 1990s, Frank Lefty Rosenthal was living openly in Boca Raton and later Miami Beach, running a sports handicapping consultancy. He took calls from high-stakes bettors. He posted lines for offshore books. He built a website. He gave interviews about the old days. He raised his 2 children. He grew old. He even slipped back into Nevada in disguise now and then, fake beard and all, to gamble in the corporate casinos that had replaced his stardust. He watched Casino when it came out and had mixed feelings. He thought Sharon Stone was brilliant. He thought Pesci's Nicky was too cartoonish next to the real Tony Spilotro, who he called far smarter and far more dangerous. He thought Scorsese got the gambling right and the personal stuff wrong. He never publicly admitted to being an informant. As late as 2006, he insisted he never talked, never testified against anyone, and never would. He died believing his own version of his own story. On October 13th, 2008, just 9 days after the 26th anniversary of the bombing that should have killed him, Frank Lefty Rosenthal had a heart attack at his home in Florida. He was 79 years old. There was no funeral procession, no mob honors, no revenge hit. The man who'd run the largest casino skim in American history, who'd been the FBI's secret asset for the better part of 30 years, who'd survived a car bomb meant to silence him, who'd buried 2 wives and outlived an entire generation of bosses, died of natural causes. And within weeks, a Las Vegas columnist finally said out loud the thing that explained all of it. Lefty Rosenthal was a rat. That is the ending Hollywood couldn't show you. Not because it wasn't dramatic, because it wasn't moral. In the movie, the bad guys die. The cycle closes. There's catharsis. In real life, the man who stole the most, betrayed the most, and lied the most lived the longest and died in comfort with his own money in the bank. So what does the Frank Lefty Rosenthal story actually tell us? It tells us the romantic mob narrative Hollywood sold us is, at its core, a fairy tale. The real Mafia didn't run on honor. It ran on leverage, and the smartest guy in the room, the one who understood that information was worth more than loyalty, was always going to win. Lefty knew from the start that the outfit was using him, so he used them right back. He sold them their own skim. And the whole time, in the shadows, he was Achilles, the bureau's man, never sitting in a witness chair but quietly helping feed the war that buried them all. That's why he was never charged. That's why he walked. He wasn't Ace Rothstein. Ace was a tragic figure, Lefty was something colder, a calculator with a heartbeat. He treated human relationships the way he treated point spreads. Variables to be exploited until the edge disappeared. His wife Jerry died in a Los Angeles motel. His best friend Tony Spilotro was beaten to death and buried in a cornfield. His bosses died in federal cells. And Lefty Rosenthal sat in Florida for a quarter century, watching football on Sundays, taking his consulting calls, collecting his winnings, and waiting for a death that came quietly, on schedule, in a bed he owned outright. The bomb should have been the end. The steel plate under that Cadillac was the cosmic mistake. Whoever designed that 1981 Eldorado never imagined that a fix for a handling problem would save the life of the most consequential mob informant in modern American history. But that's the truth at the center of this story. Sometimes the bad guys don't lose. Sometimes they don't even get caught. Sometimes they just outlive everyone and take the money with them. If you've watched Casino 50 times like the rest of us, remember this. The movie ends at the bomb. The real story starts there. And the real Lefty Rosenthal, the Achilles of Chicago, the architect of the Stardust skim, the man who informed on the most dangerous people in America and walked away rich, is the version Hollywood was never brave enough to put on screen. If this story landed as cold as it did for us, hit subscribe. We drop a new mob documentary every week. And drop a comment. Who do you really think planted that bomb under the Cadillac? Spilotro settling a score, or a Kansas City bomb man protecting the skim? Tell us below.